Smokey wasn't the last genius NASCAR tried to silence. February 14, 1988. Daytona 500. The moment every fan still talks about. Bobby Allison crosses the line first in his number 28 Miller High Life Buick. Right on his tail, second place, is his own son, Davey Allison, in the number 28 Havoline Ford. Father and son finish 1-2 at the biggest race in NASCAR. The grandstands lose their minds. Grown men cry. Families hug strangers. It's pure, raw emotion, the kind of finish that gets replayed forever. But stop the tape for 1 second. One of those cars was cheating. Right there, in front of 150,000 people and millions watching on TV. Not with a flashy illegal part you could spot from the stands. Not with something obvious that inspectors would catch in 5 minutes. With 2 hidden cubic inches of engine displacement that NASCAR's own gauges said were 100% legal. Those invisible extra cubes gave that Ford roughly 20 to 25 more horsepower, enough to draft like a missile, pull away on the straightaways, and make moves no other car could dream of. And the man who built it? He wasn't yelling from the rooftops or flipping off officials. He was a soft-spoken engine builder from Charlotte who shook hands, smiled politely, then went back to his shop and quietly outsmarted the entire sport. He studied every trick Smokey Yunick ever pulled, and then created ones even Smokey would have nodded at in respect. 4 years his engines owned Daytona and Talladega. Turned Davey Allison into a superstar. Forced NASCAR to tear engines apart for months, rewrite every single measurement rule in the book, and still couldn't erase the legend he left behind. How did he hide 2 extra cubic inches for so long? How did he make inspectors look straight at the cheat and call it legal? Why did NASCAR have to change the entire engine inspection process just to stop him? I'm going to show you exactly how he did it, step by step, with the real measurements, the real machining trick, the real reason they had to rewrite the rules. By the end, you'll be shocked at how close he came to getting away with it forever. You'll feel the frustration the big teams felt. And you'll respect the pure genius that made it possible. Stick around, I promise this story will change how you see every restrictor plate engine from that era. Torque saga. Right now. The 1980s were supposed to be NASCAR's clean decade after the Smokey Yunick wars. Inspectors had new tools, tighter templates, sealed carbs in some cases, and a rulebook thick as a phone directory. Smokey was gone, fined, banned, forced to play by the new book or sit out. The sport wanted fairness. Level playing field. No more invisible holes or garage miracles. But the engines? Still the heart of everything. Restrictor plates were coming to slow superspeedways after Bobby Allison's terrifying flip at Talladega in 1987. Big teams chased every last ounce of power within the 358 cubic inch limit. Chevrolet bowtie blocks were the hot ticket, thick wall castings designed for racing, legal as long as bore stayed 4.000 inches max. Enter Robert Yates. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina, in 1944, Yates started as a mechanic at Holman Moody in the 1960s, the Ford powerhouse that dominated with legends like Fireball Roberts and Junior Johnson. He learned fast, blueprint engines to perfection, flow heads like art, build motors that lasted 500 miles at 200 miles per hour. By the late 1970s, he left Holman Moody and opened his own shop, Robert Yates Racing Engines. Quiet. No drama. Just results. He built for Harry Ranier, then took over the number 28 team full-time after Ranier sold to Davey Allison's camp. Yates wasn't flashy like Smokey. No "best damn garage" sign. No wild stories in the press. He was the guy who showed up with engines that ran harder, longer, and quieter than anyone else's. But behind that calm southern drawl was the same fire Smokey had. While NASCAR tightened body rules and aero, Yates turned his microscope on the one area they thought was locked down. The engine block itself. Chevrolet's bowtie blocks were legal. Bore limit was clear, 4.000 inches, measured at specific points. Inspectors used pin gauges and bore scopes, but only in the top inch or so, where the piston rings sealed. Yates saw the gap. The rulebook said bore diameter, but didn't specify how deep to probe. Most teams bored straight cylinders. Yates didn't. He started machining a subtle step, or taper, in the lower part of the cylinder walls. Top inch stayed dead on 4.000 inches. Below that measurement zone? A gentle increase. Not enough to hurt ring seal or blow the motor up. Just enough to add hidden displacement. About 2 extra cubic inches total. Not massive on paper. But on a 500 horsepower restrictor plate motor? That translated to 20 to 25 real horsepower. Enough to win drafting battles at Daytona. Enough to pull away in the draft. Enough to make the number 28 Ford look unbeatable on the big tracks. He didn't brag. He didn't get caught early. Engines passed teardown after teardown. Competitors whispered, "How is that Ford so strong?" Teams protested. NASCAR measured again. Still legal. Yates just kept building, kept smiling, kept winning. But secrets like this don't stay buried forever. The question wasn't if they'd catch it. It was how long it would take, and what NASCAR would have to do when they finally did. Robert Yates didn't wake up one morning and decide to cheat NASCAR. He woke up and decided to win Daytona and Talladega the only way he knew how, by being smarter than the rulebook. By the mid-1980s, the engine limit was crystal clear, 358 cubic inches maximum. No exceptions. NASCAR measured bore diameter at specific points, usually the top inch or two of the cylinder, where the rings sealed and combustion happened. They used precision pin gauges, bore scopes, and templates. If it read 4.000 inches or less at those points, the engine passed. Every time. Most builders bored straight cylinders. Simple. Legal. Yates looked at the same rule and saw something different. Chevrolet's Bowtie racing block, a high-performance casting with thicker cylinder walls, was already legal for teams running GM-based engines, and many Ford teams used Chevy-based blocks under the table for reliability. Those thick walls gave extra material to play with. Yates realized the inspectors never probed deep into the cylinder. They measured near the top, where the piston was at TDC, top dead center, because that's where the critical sealing and combustion occurred. Below that measurement zone, say 2 to 3 inches down the bore, the rules were silent. No specification. No required depth. No full-length bore check, Mandy. So he machined a subtle taper, or step, starting just below the inspection point. Top inch, dead on 4.000 inches. Perfect. Legal. Passes every pin gauge with a smile. Then, gradually widening by a few thousandths of an inch as you go deeper into the cylinder. Not a massive flare that would blow rings or lose compression. Just enough to sneak in roughly 2 extra cubic inches across all 8 cylinders. The taper was so gentle it didn't hurt ring seal or oil control. But on a restrictor plate motor choking for air at 190 miles per hour, those 2 CI translated to 20 to 25 real, usable horsepower. On paper? Negligible. On the track? The difference between drafting in the lead pack and leading the draft. Yates didn't do this once. He refined it. Dyno tested every block variation. Matched tapers to specific restrictor plate sizes. Balanced the extra displacement so the engine stayed reliable for 500 miles. He built multiple motors like this for the number 28 team, and they kept passing teardown after teardown. But because NASCAR's procedure hadn't evolved since Smokey's era, they measured what they could see quickly, top of the bore. They didn't have the time, tools, or suspicion to drop a gauge 4 inches down every cylinder on every protested engine. Yates wasn't bragging in victory lane. He wasn't taunting officials. He was in his shop at 2 a.m., measuring wall thickness with a micrometer, smiling quietly when the math worked out. Competitors felt it first on the big tracks. Davey Allison's number 28 Ford would launch from the draft like it had an extra gear. It would pull away from packs that should have been equal. It would make moves in traffic that looked impossible, because the motor had that tiny, hidden edge when it mattered most. Whispers started in the garage. Yates' motors are too strong. Protests followed every big win. NASCAR tore down the engine. Measured the bore at the approved points. 4.000 inches. Legal. Yates would stand there, arms folded, polite southern drawl. "We followed the rules, boys." And he had. But rules written for straight bores don't catch tapered ones. 4 years, that quiet exploit let the number 28 team dominate restrictor plate racing. Daytona poles. Talladega records. Multiple wins. A young Davey Allison turning into a superstar because the motor underneath him was always just a little bit better. The genius wasn't the extra cubes. The genius was knowing exactly where NASCAR wasn't looking, and how long they'd stay blind. But nothing stays hidden forever when you're winning this much. The storm was coming, and when NASCAR finally opened their eyes, they weren't just going to measure deeper. They were going to rewrite the entire playbook. Let's get under the hood, literally, and look at the single most brilliant and infuriating piece of engineering Robert Yates pulled off. We're talking about a Chevrolet Bowtie racing block. Thick cylinder walls. Designed for high-performance abuse. Legal in NASCAR as long as displacement stayed at or below 358 cubic inches. The rule was simple on paper: bore diameter not to exceed 4.000 inches, stroke fixed at 3.480 inches, standard 350 crank destroked slightly. Measure the bore, sign off, move on. But here's where Yates turned the rule into Swiss cheese. NASCAR's inspection procedure in the late 1980s focused on the top portion of the cylinder, typically the first 1 to 1.5 inches from the deck surface. That's where the piston sits at top dead center, TDC, where the rings seal, where combustion pressure peaks. Inspectors dropped pin gauges or used bore scopes right there. Quick, repeatable, non-destructive. If it read 4.000 inches or under, green light. Yates machined the cylinders differently. From the deck down about 1 inch, perfectly straight 4.000 inch bore. Pin gauge slides in smooth. No issue. Inspector smiles, checks it off. Then, starting just below that inspection zone, a very gentle taper begins. Not a sudden step that would kill ring seal and blow the motor in 100 miles. A smooth, progressive widening, maybe 0.002 to 0.004 inches larger by the time you reach midstroke, then holding or tapering back slightly toward the bottom. Across 8 cylinders, that tiny increase added up to roughly 1.8 to 2.2 extra cubic inches of swept volume. On a restrictor plate engine, strangled to about 450 to 480 horsepower to keep speeds safe at Daytona and Talladega, those 2 CI were like rocket fuel. Real-world gain? 20 to 25 horsepower at peak RPM, plus better torque in the 5,500 to 7,000 revolutions per minute range where drafting battles are won and lost. Why did it work so well? The taper was below ring travel at TDC. Rings never saw the wider section during combustion sealing. Oil control stayed good. Blow-by minimal. Engine lived through 500-mile races without drama. Extra volume equals extra air/fuel charge. More mixture trapped equals more bang on the power stroke. On restrictor plate motors already air-starved, that extra gulp made the biggest difference exactly where it hurt most: top-end pull in the draft. No external evidence. No bigger heads, no wild cams, no obvious jetting tricks. Just internal geometry the inspectors weren't probing. Dyno sheets looked normal. Teardowns showed stock bore at the measured point. Yates didn't stop at one block. He tested dozens. Matched taper profiles to different restrictor sizes. They changed year to year. Balanced rods, pistons, and cranks to handle the extra stress without vibration. Tuned headers and intake to maximize the gain. Every motor was a custom symphony. On the track, the effect was brutal. Davey Allison's number 28 Ford would sit in the draft pack, looking equal. Then, on the outside groove, it would surge. Not a violent explosion, a smooth, relentless pull that opened a car-length gap before anyone reacted. Competitors felt it in their guts. Something's wrong with that motor. But when they protested, the teardown showed legal bore. And again, Yates stood in the garage, quiet, polite, Southern manners intact. "We just built it right, boys." Inside, he knew exactly what he'd done. He'd turned a measurement blind spot into 25 horsepower nobody could explain. He'd made the restrictor plate, NASCAR's great equalizer, unequal again. And for 3 to 4 seasons, that hidden edge let the number 28 team win poles, sweep plates, and build a legacy that still echoes. But genius like this leaves footprints. Whispers turned to shouts. Protests piled up. NASCAR tech directors started asking harder questions. Why are Yates motors always stronger on the big tracks? The answer was coming. And when they finally looked deeper, the rulebook was about to get a lot thicker. The proof wasn't in the shop or on the dyno. It was on the asphalt at 190 miles per hour, where hidden horsepower turns into pure, undeniable speed. From 1988 through the early 1990s, the number 28 Havoline Ford, powered by Robert Yates engines, became the nightmare of every restrictor plate race. Daytona, Talladega, Michigan, Atlanta. Wherever the plates went on and the draft ruled, that yellow and blue Ford showed up looking equal and left looking untouchable. Start with the 1988 Daytona 500. Davey Allison, still a rising star at 27, qualifies strong, runs in the lead pack all day, and finishes second, pushing his father Bobby to the win. The TV cameras catch the emotional father-son moment, but what they don't show is the motor under the hood. That number 28 Ford drafted like it had an extra gear. It pulled out of turns with a surge that made other cars look lazy. Competitors in the pack felt it, something ain't right. But post-race teardown? Bore measures 4.000 inches at the top. Legal. No flags. The pattern repeated. Talladega in May 1988. Davey wins the pole, leads laps, and finishes top 5. The Ford's top-end pole was ferocious. It would sling out of the draft and open gaps nobody could close. Teams protested. NASCAR measured. Legal again. By 1989, the dominance escalated. Davey Allison wins the Talladega Die Hard 500 in July, his first plate win, and the car looks like it's on rails in the draft. He repeats at Michigan in August, then again at Talladega in October. The number 28 becomes the car to beat on the big tracks. Drivers whisper in the garage, Yates' motors got that extra snap. Crew chiefs compare notes, same restrictor, same aero, same tires, but the Ford pulls harder at 6,800 to 7,200 revolutions per minute. 1990 and 1991? More of the same. Davey racks up poles and wins at Daytona, Talladega, and other speedways. The team's restrictor plate record is ridiculous: multiple poles, consistent top 5s, and a string of victories that made the number 28 the benchmark. Other teams, Roush, Childress, Hendrick, threw money at engines, but Yates' shop kept delivering motors that simply performed better in the draft. The edge showed in subtle ways. A car-length advantage in the tri-oval. A stronger push in the pack. Better throttle response coming off corners. That 20 to 25 horsepower from the hidden taper didn't make the car faster in a straight-line vacuum test. It made it faster where it mattered. Real racing conditions at 190 plus mph with 40 cars fighting for air. Protests became routine. After every big plate win, officials hauled the engine to the tech trailer. They measured bores at the approved points. 4.000 inches. They checked stroke, deck height, everything. Nothing illegal. Yates stood there, calm, polite. We build him right. But the whispers grew louder. How does that Ford always have that pull? Yates is doing something we can't figure out. Competitors started tearing down their own motors, looking for the secret. Nothing. NASCAR inspectors felt the pressure, teams calling headquarters, demanding deeper checks. Yates never gloated. No victory lane speeches about tricks. He let the results talk. Davey Allison became a superstar partly because the motor gave him confidence to make bold moves. The number 28 team won races they had no business winning. The legend grew. And NASCAR listened. Behind the scenes, tech directors started questioning the measurement procedure. Are we probing deep enough? Is the bore uniform all the way down? The questions turned into action. One day, they didn't stop at the top inch. They probed deeper. They used longer gauges. They checked mid-bore and lower sections. That's when they saw it. The gentle taper. The hidden volume. The extra cubes that had been staring them in the face for years, just below where they'd always measured. The game was up. But by then, the damage, or the genius, depending on who you ask, was done. The number 28 Ford had rewritten restrictor plate history. Davey had his championships in sight. And NASCAR was forced to face the truth. Their inspection had a massive blind spot. The rule change was coming fast. And it would change engine building forever. The whispers in the garage turned to shouts. Then to formal complaints. Then to something NASCAR couldn't ignore, sustained, angry pressure from every major team owner, engine builder, and manufacturer who wasn't Robert Yates. By 1990 to 1991, the pattern was too obvious. The number 28 Ford, and any Yates-powered car on a restrictor plate track consistently pulled stronger in the draft, made impossible passes, and won more than their fair share of poles and races. Competitors weren't just losing. They were being humiliated by a motor that looked identical on paper but performed like it had a secret turbo nobody could find. Protests flooded in after every big superspeedway event. Teams demanded full teardowns, not just the quick top-bore checks. NASCAR tech officials, under fire from the boardroom, started digging deeper. They didn't stop at the usual 1-inch measurement zone anymore. They used longer pins. They probed mid-cylinder. They measured at multiple depths with stepped gauges. And there it was. The gentle taper, the subtle widening below the inspection point, the extra 1.8 to 2.2 cubic inches that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The blocks weren't straightboard like everyone else's, they were cleverly machined to add displacement where NASCAR's old procedure never looked. The reaction was swift and furious. NASCAR didn't ban Yates personally, he was too respected, too integral to the sport. But they banned the trick overnight. New rules rolled out. mandatory full-depth bore measurements using specialized stepped or multi-point gauges. Any variation beyond a tiny tolerance, like 0.005 inches from top to bottom, became illegal. Blocks had to be uniform throughout the cylinder length. Inspectors got new tools, new training, and strict orders to probe every inch. The bow tie block exploit was dead. Yates' hidden edge vanished. He adapted, of course. Switched to straight-bore motors. Kept winning with better heads, cams, and tuning. But the golden era of that specific advantage ended. The number 28 team's restrictor plate stranglehold loosened. Other builders caught up. The class balanced again, at least on paper. Yates never went public with denials or excuses. In rare interviews years later, he'd shrug with that quiet smile. We built to the rules that were written. When they changed, we built to the new ones. No bitterness. No finger-pointing. Just a man who understood the game better than most. But the backlash wasn't just technical. It was emotional for the garage. Competitors felt betrayed, not by cheating in the classic sense, but by a blind spot so cleverly exploited that it made their efforts feel pointless. Teams spent fortunes chasing parity, only to learn the game had been rigged by measurement, not magic. NASCAR learned too. They never again trusted top-only inspections for displacement. The rulebook got thicker, procedures got stricter, and engine teardowns became more invasive. What started as a quiet taper in a cylinder wall forced the sanctioning body to evolve, just like Smokey's air bleeds had years earlier. Yates paid no fines, no suspensions. He kept his reputation as one of the most honest, most brilliant builders in NASCAR history. But the trick he pioneered became legend, the kind of story told in hushed tones in engine shops. Remember when Yates hid 2 cubes and nobody saw it coming? The man didn't break the rules. He exposed how incomplete they were. And NASCAR, to protect the sport, had to close the gap he found. But closing one gap always opens another somewhere. The question lingered, who would find the next one? Robert Yates didn't disappear after the taper trick got exposed. He didn't get fined, banned, or blacklisted like some rule-benders before him. Instead, he became one of the most respected names in NASCAR engine building, the guy who quietly proved that genius can hide in the smallest details. After the full-depth bore rules kicked in during the early 1990s, Yates adapted without missing a beat. He kept building motors for the number 28 team, then expanded Roush-Yates engines in partnership with Jack Roush. His shop became the go-to for 4 teams. Davey Allison kept winning, including the 1992 Daytona 500 pole and multiple restrictor plate battles, because Yates' engines were still better tuned, better balanced, better everything. The hidden cubes were gone, but the engineering mindset stayed. Yates won championships as an owner, 2002 with Dale Jarrett, built engines that powered legends like Dale Earnhardt Jr., Ricky Rudd, and Elliott Sadler. He was inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame, the NASCAR Hall of Fame in spirit through his contributions, and even after his passing in 2017 from liver cancer, his name lives on in Roush-Yates engines, still dominating today. But the real legacy isn't the wins or the trophies. It's the philosophy he carried forward from Smokey Yunick. The rules only protect what the rulemakers understand at that moment. Smokey exploited air bleeds because NASCAR measured jets, not internal passages. Yates exploited cylinder bores because they measured top only, not full depth. Both proved the same thing: innovation finds the gaps. And when the gaps close, the sport gets better. Safer. Fair. More technical. NASCAR's engine inspection process today? Multi-point gauges, laser scanning in some cases, full teardowns on winners. That evolution started with tricks like Yates. The restrictor plate era, and now tapered spacers, owes part of its balance to builders like him forcing the system to evolve. Yates never called it cheating. He called it building to the rules as written. In interviews, he'd say things like, "You try to stay ahead of what's coming." No arrogance. Just fact. Competitors who lost to him? They respected him. Even the ones who protested every week. Because deep down, they knew, if they'd thought of it first, they'd have done the same. The bigger lesson for every gearhead watching this? The biggest advantages in racing don't come from breaking rules. They come from understanding the rules, and the physics behind them, better than the people enforcing them. Smokey started the tradition in the 60s and 70s. Yates carried it into the 80s and 90s. And somewhere out there, right now, another quiet builder is studying the current rulebook, looking for the next blind spot. Not to cheat, to win. Because in NASCAR, winning means pushing until the rules push back. And when they do, the sport gets stronger. That's the real revolution. And that's the story of Robert Yates, the quiet genius who outsmarted NASCAR long after Smokey Yunick hid horsepower in plain sight and forced the rulebook to evolve again. He didn't break the sport. He made it better by proving true winners don't cheat the rules, they master them. What do you think? Was Yates the smartest rulebender after Smokey? Or is there someone even sneakier we should cover next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Yates or Smokey? Who wins the genius battle? If this blew your mind, smash that like button. It helps Torque Saga reach more gearheads. Hit subscribe and ring the bell for the next hidden legend. We're just getting started. Thanks for watching till the end. You're the real MVPs. Stay fast, stay curious. Torque Saga out.